You're washing dishes, or driving, or lying in bed with the lights off, and suddenly you're arguing with someone who isn't there. Maybe it's the coworker who took credit for your idea. Maybe it's the version of your ex who finally admits they were wrong. Maybe it's a stranger from 10 years ago who said something small and cruel, and somehow you're still answering them. You didn't choose to think about this, it just showed up, and once it starts, you can't seem to make it stop. You run the whole thing in your head. You say the perfect line. They react exactly how you need them to. Sometimes you rewind and try a different opening, like you're editing a scene that already happened or one that never will. Here's the strange part. You know this conversation is not real. It is not happening now, and it will probably never happen at all. And yet your chest tightens, your jaw sets, your heart rate actually climbs over words that exist nowhere except inside your own skull. Why would a brain built for survival spend its limited energy on a fight with no opponent? For a long time, psychologists filed this away as a bad habit, something to be managed, like nail-biting or procrastination. Just stop doing it, they said. Easier advised than done, because the people who do this most are often the ones who are paying the closest attention to their own lives. The real answer starts somewhere you wouldn't expect, an office at Harvard and a post-it note. In the late 1990s, psychologists Daniel Wegner and Kurt Gray were studying something called the theory of mind, our built-in ability to guess what other people are thinking. What they noticed was unsettling. The brain doesn't just model other people to predict them. It uses those same mental tools on people who are absent, on people who are dead, on people who never existed at all. Your brain, in other words, cannot fully tell the difference between rehearsing for someone and reliving something with them. To your nervous system, an imagined confrontation and a remembered one are built from nearly the same material. That's the first piece, but it doesn't explain why this specific kind of imagining, the unfinished argument, is the one that keeps returning. For that, you need a Russian psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnik and a busy Viennese cafe. In the 1920s, Zeigarnik noticed something odd about waiters. They could remember a customer's entire complicated order in perfect detail, right up until the bill was paid. The moment the transaction was closed, the memory dissolved. She brought this into the lab, giving people simple tasks and interrupting some before they finished. Later, she asked everyone what they remembered. The unfinished tasks won, not by a little. People recalled interrupted tasks roughly twice as often as completed ones. This became known as the Zeigarnik effect. Your mind holds onto anything that feels unresolved, and it keeps nudging you back toward it, the way a tab left open in the background keeps pulling your attention even when you're looking somewhere else. Now put these two discoveries together. An argument that never got its ending is, to your brain, an open task, not a memory, a task. And because your mind treats imagined people almost like real ones, it keeps sending you back into the scene to try, one more time, to close it. This is why the conversations you replay are almost never the ones that went well. Nobody lies awake, reliving a compliment they handled gracefully. The ones that return are the ones where you froze, where the right words arrived 4 hours too late, where you needed to feel resolved, and the moment ended before you could get there. Your brain isn't torturing you for fun, it's trying to finish something. There's a deeper layer underneath this, and it has to do with a very old kind of danger. For most of human history, your standing within your group wasn't a metaphor, it was survival. Being cast out of a tribe of 30 people, alone, on a landscape with predators and no backup, was close to a death sentence. So evolution built something into the human brain that is almost comically sensitive. A constant, quiet system for tracking your social standing, running in the background at all times. Psychologists sometimes call this sociometer theory, the idea proposed by Mark Leary that your self-esteem functions less like a personality trait and more like a fuel gauge, constantly measuring how included or threatened you are within your social world. When someone disrespects you and you don't respond, that gauge drops. And your brain, the same one that evolved to treat exile as mortal danger, doesn't calmly note the social hiccup and move on. It sounds something closer to an alarm. The imagined comeback isn't vanity. It's your ancient threat system trying to patch the wound in real time, the only way it knows how, by rehearsing your way back to safety. Which raises the obvious question. If the danger is fake and the person isn't even in the room, why does replaying the scene feel like it's helping, even when it clearly isn't? Because for a few seconds, it actually works. When you imagine finally saying the perfect line, your brain doesn't just think about winning. It gets a small hit of the same reward chemistry that a real win would produce. Dopamine doesn't require your triumph to be true. It only requires your brain to believe it, even briefly. That's why the fantasy feels satisfying the moment it plays, and why, minutes later, you're already rewinding to run it again, chasing a resolution that keeps slipping just out of reach. It's the mental equivalent of scratching a mosquito bite. Immediate relief, nothing actually healed. There's a particular version of this that deserves its own name, because almost everyone recognizes it instantly: l'esprit de l'escalier, literally, the spirit of the staircase, an 18th century French phrase coined by the philosopher Denis Diderot for the perfect retort that only arrives once you've already left the room, while you're on the stairs, walking away, powerless to go back and say it. Diderot wasn't describing a flaw in himself. He was describing something built into how conversation and cognition work. In the moment, your brain is occupied with dozens of jobs at once: reading tone, managing your face, tracking the room, holding back the version of yourself you don't want to show. Sharp, cutting responses require slow, careful construction. And slow, careful construction is a luxury that live conversation almost never grants you. So the good line arrives late, not because you're slow, because real-time conversation was never built to reward your best thinking. Your best thinking shows up once the pressure is gone, which is exactly when it's no longer useful, except, apparently, to your brain, which decides that 8 hours later, at 2 in the morning, is still worth a shot. So what actually closes the loop, if replaying it endlessly doesn't? Research on rumination, repetitive, cyclical thinking about a distressing situation, draws a fairly sharp line between two things that feel almost identical from the inside. One is called reflection, examining what happened in order to understand it, extract something useful, and set it down. The other is rumination, replaying the same footage over and over without ever reaching a new conclusion, like a scratched record stuck on the same note. Reflection resolves the Zeigarnik loop because it gives your brain something it's actually searching for: understanding, closure, a place to file the memory. Rumination only pretends to search. It goes back to the same door without ever trying the handle. This is why simply telling yourself to stop rarely works. The instruction, "stop thinking about it," doesn't answer the question your brain is actually stuck on. It just papers over an open task that hasn't been closed. What genuinely helps is strange, but consistent across the research. Writing the exchange down, even fictionally, tends to help more than replaying it in your head, because writing forces the vague, looping feeling into a fixed, finished shape. Once it exists as a sentence on a page, your brain can treat it the way Zeigarnik's waiters treated a paid bill: closed. Some people find relief in imagining the moment from the other person's point of view, which shifts the exercise from rehearsal into something closer to reflection. Others find that namming what they actually needed in that moment, to be heard, to be taken seriously, to not be humiliated, resolves the loop faster than any perfect comeback ever could, because it turns out the need was never really about winning the argument. It was about being able to stop fighting it. So the next time you catch yourself mid-argument with someone who has no idea you're speaking to them, you don't have to feel foolish about it. You're not broken, and you're not obsessing over nothing. You're watching a 500,000-year-old survival system, one built for a world of small tribes and real physical danger, trying its best to patch a wound using tools that were never designed for the modern shape of conflict. The argument was never really about the last word. It was about being allowed to put it down. And maybe that's the real ending, not the perfect line you never got to say, but the moment you finally stop needing to.